Captain Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. The structure was bigger than any city on Earth, with towers that stretched for miles and docking bays that could hold 1,000 ships. This was Zentara Prime Station, the home of the Galactic Council. "Hard to believe we're really here," said Commander Ryan Beck, his tactical officer. Ryan had been with Jake for 5 years, and they had explored dozens of star systems together. But nothing had prepared them for this moment. 20 years since we first detected alien signals," Jake replied, "and now we're about to meet them face to face." The journey to this moment had been long. Earth's first radio telescopes had picked up strange signals from deep space in 2387. It took years to decode them and realize they were communications between different alien species. When humanity finally built ships capable of faster-than-light travel, they followed those signals to their source. Ambassador Lisa Martinez entered the bridge, wearing her formal diplomatic uniform. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice that could handle any crisis. Behind her walked Dr. Ellen Foster, their expert on alien cultures and ancient history. "The Council has approved our docking request," Lisa said. "We'll be meeting with Speaker Vorthak in 2 hours." Jake nodded. "Any last-minute advice from the cultural briefings?" "Be polite, be honest, and don't make any sudden movements," Ellen said with a slight smile. "Some of these species see quick motions as aggressive behavior." The docking process took 30 minutes. The station's gravity was lighter than Earth normal, and the air had a strange metallic taste. Jake, Lisa, Ellen, and 2 security officers followed a guide through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy. There were tall, thin creatures that looked like walking crystals. Short, furry beings with 6 arms, things that seemed to be made of living metal, and dozens of other forms that Jake couldn't even begin to describe. All of them stopped to stare at the humans as they passed. The council chamber was enormous. Hundreds of seats arranged in circles, each designed for a different type of being. At the center stood a raised platform where Speaker Vorthak waited. He was one of the crystal beings, about 9 feet tall, with a body that seemed to be made of blue-green glass that glowed from within. "Welcome, beings of Earth," Vorthak said. His voice came through translation devices attached to their uniforms. "We greet you in the name of the Galactic Council, which has maintained peace among the stars for 3,000 years. Lisa stepped forward and bowed slightly. "We thank you for this honor, Speaker Vorthak. Humanity is grateful for the chance to join the galactic community." "Before we begin the formal proceedings," Vorthak said, "we must update our records with your world's proper designation. Our translators have given us the name Earth from your languages, but we require the most ancient name of your homeworld, as is tradition for all new member species." Lisa nodded. This was expected. Every species had old names for their home planets, usually dating back thousands of years. She had prepared for this moment carefully. "Our world has many names in our various languages," she began. "In our oldest records it was called Terra, Gaia, and in some of our most ancient tongues." She paused and spoke a word in a language so old that only a few scholars on Earth still knew it. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Every sound in the chamber stopped. The hundreds of alien beings froze as if someone had pressed a pause button on reality. Vorthak's crystal body began to develop cracks, thin lines spreading across his surface like a breaking window. Several of the metal beings started making high-pitched whining sounds. The translation devices began beeping rapidly, cycling through warning messages in dozens of languages. Red lights flashed throughout the chamber. In the distance, alarms began to sound. Jake felt his hand move automatically to his sidearm, though he didn't know why. Ryan was doing the same thing. Something deep in their minds was screaming danger, even though they couldn't see any immediate threat. "What's happening?" Ellen whispered, but no one answered her. Vorthak's voice, when it finally came, was different. The smooth diplomatic tone was gone, replaced by something that sounded like fear. Did you just speak the forbidden name?" "I don't understand," Lisa said. "I simply gave you the ancient name of our world as you requested." "Impossible," whispered another voice from the crowd. This came from a being that looked like a giant spider made of silver. "The forbidden world was destroyed 45,000 years ago. The records are clear." "The records are wrong," said a third voice belonging to something that resembled a floating jellyfish made of light. "The forbidden world was not destroyed. It was hidden." hidden until its warriors were needed again. Forthak's crack spread further. "Emergency session," he announced, his voice echoing strangely. "All council members to secure positions immediately. The humans are to be confined to their vessel pending investigation." "Wait," Jake said, stepping forward. "What's going on here? What forbidden world? What are you talking about?" But no one answered. Security forces appeared from hidden doors around the chamber. They weren't threatening the humans directly, but their intent was clear. The meeting was over. As they were escorted back to the New Horizon, Ellen grabbed Jake's arm. "Captain, I've studied every culture in our databases. I've never heard of any forbidden worlds or ancient warnings. What did we just walk into?" Jake looked back at the council chamber, where aliens were fleeing in what could only be described as panic. "I don't know, Ellen, but I have a feeling we're about to find out." Back on the New Horizon, they were immediately surrounded by council security ships. The message was polite but firm. They were not to leave the area or communicate with Earth until the council had time to review the situation. "Review what situation?" Ryan asked as they sat in the ship's conference room. "We came here in peace. We followed all their protocols, and they act like Lisa just declared war on the entire galaxy." "The ancient name," Lisa said quietly. Something about the ancient name of Earth terrified them. Jake stared out at the alien ships surrounding them. Each one was larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. If they wanted to destroy the New Horizon, they could do it in seconds. "Ellen," he said finally, "I want you to access everything you can from their data networks. Find out what they know about this forbidden world. Find out what they're so afraid of." "That might be considered spying," Ellen warned. "At this point," Jake replied, "I think we're already in more trouble than we know how to handle." As Ellen began her research, none of them noticed the strange readings appearing on their long-range sensors. Deep in space, something ancient was beginning to stir. Dr. Ellen Foster had always been good at finding information that others missed. As a xenoarchaeologist, she spent most of her time digging through ancient records and forgotten databases. But she had never seen anything like what she was discovering in the Council's historical archives. The Council's library was massive, containing knowledge gathered from thousands of worlds over millions of years. Ellen had been given access as part of the cultural exchange program, back when everything seemed normal. Now, with the humans confined to their ship, she was probably breaking several galactic laws by continuing her research. She didn't care. She started with simple searches. Forbidden World brought up nothing useful. Ancient warnings gave her thousands of results, but none seemed connected to Earth. It wasn't until she searched for Death World that things became interesting. The first document was from a species called the HFY, written 12,000 years ago. It was a military report about a patrol that had discovered the wreckage of an enormous battle in deep space. The report mentioned finding debris from ships using technology that the HFY couldn't understand, and energy readings that suggested weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. The most disturbing part was the final line: "Recommend immediate retreat. This area shows signs of Death World intervention. We do not wish to attract their attention." Ellen kept searching. The next document was older, dating back 28,000 years. It came from the Veltar Empire, a civilization that had ruled half the galaxy before mysteriously vanishing overnight. "The warrior builders have struck again," the document read. 3 more Void Devourer fleets eliminated in the Spiral Arm sector. "Our scouts report that the Death World forces used weapons that bend reality itself. We must maintain our non-interference treaty with them at all costs." Void Devourers. Ellen had never heard that term before. She searched for it and found files that made her blood run cold. The Void Devourers were described as entities from outside normal spacetime. They were beings of pure hunger and destruction, capable of consuming entire galaxies. According to the records, they had destroyed thousands of civilizations across multiple galaxies over millions of years. But 50,000 years ago, they had simply vanished. Ellen found a record from the ancient Zenthari archives, one of the oldest known civilizations. It was written in a language so old that the translation software had trouble with it, but the meaning was clear enough. "The infinite hunger has been broken. The devourers flee to the dark spaces between stars. The warriors from the cradle of Starkillers have done what no other species could accomplish. They have ended the eternal war. Blessed be the world that ended the infinite hunger. May its true name never be spoken. lest the Devourers remember their defeat and return for vengeance. Ellen's hands were shaking as she read, "The world that ended the infinite hunger." That was what Lisa had said in the ancient Earth language. That was the name that had caused such terror in the council chamber. She kept reading, finding more and more references to the ancient war. Every major civilization had legends about it. The details varied, but the core story was always the same. Cosmic entities of destruction had been consuming galaxy after galaxy, until warriors from a single world had somehow stopped them. The descriptions of these warriors were fascinating and terrifying. They were called the Born Fighters and the Death Dealers. They used weapons that could affect reality at a quantum level. They could survive in environments that would kill any other known life form. Most importantly, they never ever gave up. One document from 30,000 years ago contained a chilling observation. The Death World warriors do not fight to win territories or resources. They fight to completely destroy their enemies. They will pursue a single enemy across multiple galaxies and through decades of time, until that enemy is eliminated. They cannot be reasoned with, bargained with, or defeated. They can only be avoided. Ellen found video records from the ancient archives. The quality was poor, but she could make out images of beings that looked remarkably human, wearing armor she didn't recognize, wielding weapons that seemed to bend light around them. In one clip, she watched a single warrior destroy something the size of a small moon with what appeared to be just his voice. The more she read, the more terrified she became. Not of the Void Devourers, but of what humanity apparently used to be. According to these records, Earth hadn't just participated in the ancient war. Earth had been the center of it. Humanity had been bred or evolved specifically to fight entities that no other species could even survive contact with. The final document she found was the most disturbing. It was a treaty, signed by every major power in the galaxy 45,000 years ago. The title was simple: The Pact of Eternal Silence. The treaty was short and to the point. Every signatory agreed that the true name of the Death World would never be spoken aloud. All records of its location would be destroyed. Any ship that found the world by accident would be ordered to leave immediately and never return. Most importantly, if the Death World was ever rediscovered, its inhabitants were to be left completely alone. The reason for this treaty was explained in a single paragraph. The warriors of the Death World have agreed to enter deep sleep, their weapons silent, their ships hidden. In exchange, we vow to never disturb their rest. Should they wake before the infinite hunger returns, the galaxy itself may not survive their attention. Ellen's communication device buzzed. It was Captain Jake calling from the New Horizon. "Ellen, where are you? The Council has been looking for you." "I'm in the archives, Captain, and you need to hear what I've found." "Can it wait? We're having some kind of technical problems here. Our long-range sensors are picking up strange readings from outside the galaxy." Ellen felt ice in her veins. "What kind of readings?" "Movement. Something big moving toward us from the dark space between galaxies. Ryan says it matches no known ship configuration." Ellen closed her eyes. She knew what those readings meant. Speaking Earth's true name hadn't just identified humanity to the Council. It had sent a signal into deep space, a signal that something had been waiting 50,000 years to hear. "Captain," she said quietly, "get everyone back to the ship. We need to leave now." "What? Why?" "Ellen, what did you find?" "I found out why they're afraid of us," she said, gathering up the files she had downloaded. "And I found out what's coming." As she ran through the station's corridors toward the docking bay, Ellen couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Not by the aliens around her, but by something else. Something that was still very far away, but getting closer. The ancient war was about to begin again, and humanity, whether they knew it or not, was about to remember why the galaxy had once feared them more than any cosmic horror. Commander Ryan Beck had been staring at the sensor readings for 3 hours, and they still didn't make sense. The objects moving toward the galaxy from deep space were massive, each one the size of a large moon. But they weren't following any known laws of physics. "Captain," he called to Jake, who was reviewing Ellen's research files, "you need to see this." Jake walked over to the tactical station, where Ryan had multiple displays showing long-range sensor data. "What am I looking at?" "These things out there, they're not ships. At least not ships like anything we've ever seen. They're moving faster than light, but without any kind of drive signature. And look at this. Ryan pointed to an energy reading chart. They're absorbing light. Not reflecting it, not bending it. Absorbing it completely. How many of them are there? That's the problem. Every time we do a new scan, the number changes. Sometimes there are 12. Sometimes there are 50. Sometimes our sensors can't detect them at all even though they were just there a minute before. Jake studied the readings. His military training told him these were enemy ships approaching, but everything else about the situation defied explanation. How long until they reach the galaxy? If they maintain current speed, about 6 days. But Captain, there's something else. Watch this. Ryan called up a star chart showing the outer edge of the galaxy. See this star system here? It went dark 3 hours ago. What do you mean went dark? I mean it's gone. Not destroyed, not collapsed, gone like it never existed. And here, this nebula that's been stable for 1,000,000 years. It just vanished. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had read Ellen's files about the Void Devourers, entities that consumed entire star systems. But reading about it and seeing it happen were two very different things, sir, came a voice from the communication station. It was Lieutenant Carol Stone, their signals officer. I'm getting reports from across the galaxy. Ancient warning systems are activating on hundreds of worlds. Some of them have been dormant for tens of thousands of years. What kind of warning systems? Emergency broadcasts, sir, all in different languages, but they all seem to be saying the same thing. The infinite hunger returns. Prepare for the final darkness. Seek shelter in the light of the death world. Jake was about to respond when his personal communicator buzzed. It was a priority message from Earth, routed through the Council's communication network. He opened it and found a video message from General Patricia Webb, head of Earth's Planetary Defense Force. Jake. Patricia's voice was tense. We're getting some very strange reports from around the world. Ancient sites are activating. Stonehenge is glowing. The pyramids are resonating with some kind of energy. Cave paintings in Australia are moving, and people are having dreams. Jake frowned. What kind of dreams? Military tactics. Weapon designs. Languages they've never heard before. Jake, my 6-year-old daughter, drew a blueprint for something our top scientists say could be a gravitational weapon. She doesn't even know what gravity is, the message continued. We're also getting reports from human colonies throughout Council space. Construction workers are building things they don't remember planning. Scientists are solving equations they don't understand. It's like the entire human race is remembering something we never knew we had forgotten. Jake paused the message and looked around the bridge. Now that he thought about it, his crew had been acting strangely too. Ryan had modified the sensor array 3 times in the past day, making improvements that shouldn't have been possible with their current technology. Carol had been speaking in languages she claimed not to know. Even he had found himself understanding tactical situations in ways that went beyond his training. He resumed the message. Jake, I need you to get back to Earth as soon as possible. Something is waking up in humanity, and I think we're going to need every one of our people here for what's coming. Before Jake could respond, Ellen rushed onto the bridge. Her face was pale and she was carrying a datapad loaded with information from the Council archives. Captain, we have a problem. A big one. She activated the main screen and displayed a star chart. I've been tracking the movement of those entities Ryan detected. They're not heading for random targets. They're following a specific path. What kind of path? They're retracing the route of the ancient war. Every system they've consumed or attacked was a battlefield from 50,000 years ago. They're following the same path the Void Devourers took when they were first driven out of the galaxy. Jake studied the chart. What's at the end of that path? Ellen's voice was barely a whisper. Earth. The bridge fell silent. Everyone was staring at the display, watching the predicted course of the approaching entities. If Ellen was right, they had less than 6 days before the Void Devourers reached human space. There's more, Ellen continued. I found records of the original war. The Void Devourers aren't just mindless destroyers. They learn from their defeats. They've been planning their return for 50,000 years and they're coming for revenge. Ryan looked up from his console. Captain, the Council is requesting an immediate meeting. They want to discuss evacuation procedures. Evacuation? Jake felt anger rising in his chest. They want us to run? According to their message, sir. The Council's plan is to evacuate all inhabited systems in the projected path of the Void Devourers. They estimate they can save about 30% of the galactic population if they start immediately. Jake stared at the star chart, at the line of consumed systems pointing like an arrow toward Earth. Something deep in his mind was stirring. Something that felt ancient and powerful and very, very angry. "No," he said quietly. "Sir? No evacuation. No running." Jake's voice was getting stronger, more confident. "Ellen, can you access the Council's military databases?" "I think so, but why?" "Because we're not running from these things. We're going to stop them." Jake turned to address his entire crew. "I want a complete inventory of every weapon, every ship, every military asset in the galaxy. And I want to know the current location of every human being in Council space." "Captain," Ryan said carefully, "what are you planning?" Jake smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, he felt completely sure of himself. "I'm planning to do what humanity does best. Ryan, I'm planning to fight." As if responding to his words, the ship's computer systems began displaying tactical information that shouldn't have existed in their databases. Weapon designs that Earth's military had never developed. Ship modifications that could increase their firepower by 1,000%. And in the back of his mind, Jake could hear voices speaking in a language he had never learned, but somehow understood perfectly. The ancient war was about to begin again. And this time humanity was going to finish it. Bobby Martinez had been working construction on Europa Station for 3 years. He was good with his hands, could fix almost anything, and never asked too many questions about overtime pay. But this morning, he found himself doing something that should have been impossible. He was building a weapon. Bobby didn't know what else to call it. He had started with a standard plasma cutter, the kind used for ship repairs. But over the past 2 days, he had been modifying it, adding components that he somehow knew how to create even though he had never seen anything like them before. The strange part wasn't just that he was building it. The strange part was that he knew exactly what it was for. The weapon in his hands could disrupt energy-based life forms, the kind that existed outside normal spacetime. He had never heard of such creatures before this week, but now he could design weapons to kill them. Martinez called his supervisor, a gruff man named Tony Williams. "What the hell are you working on?" Bobby looked down at the device in his hands. It was sleek and dangerous looking. With crystals he had grown himself using techniques he couldn't remember learning. "I'm not sure, boss, but I think we're going to need it." Tony was about to respond when the station's communication system activated. The voice that came through belonged to Admiral Susan Clark, who had taken command of all human military forces 3 days ago. "Attention all humans in Council space." Susan's voice was calm but urgent. "You are experiencing what we are calling the awakening. Do not be alarmed. The knowledge and abilities you are gaining are part of your genetic heritage. Trust your instincts. Build what feels right. Create what seems necessary. Humanity is remembering who we really are." Bobby nodded. That made sense somehow. The voice continued. "All humans are to report to designated rally points within 48 hours. This is not a request. This is a mobilization order. We have work to do." Tony stared at Bobby's weapon. "You think this thing will actually work?" Bobby activated the device. Energy hummed through it and the air around them shimmered. Both men could feel power radiating from the crystals. "Yeah, boss. I think it'll work just fine." 3,000 light years away, Dr. Grace Thompson was having similar experiences on the research station orbiting Kepler 442b. She was a theoretical physicist, specializing in gravitational studies. But for the past week, she had been working on equations that went far beyond anything she had learned in university. She was learning how to weaponize gravity itself. The mathematics were incredibly complex, but they felt familiar, like remembering a song from childhood. She found herself writing formulas that could create localized gravitational fields strong enough to crush matter at the atomic level. More importantly, she was designing fields that could affect things that existed outside normal dimensions. "Professor Thompson," said her research assistant, Kevin Adams, "the computer models say your calculations are impossible." Grace smiled as she continued writing. "The computers don't know what we're capable of, Kevin. They're thinking like the old humans. We're remembering how to think like the new ones." Kevin looked at the equations covering every wall of the laboratory. "New ones?" "The ones who fought the war." Grace activated a small test device she had built using components from the station's gravity lab. A pen on her desk suddenly became 1,000 times heavier, crushing the surface beneath it. The ones who won? On Earth, the changes were even more dramatic. 8-year-old Timmy Foster was drawing pictures that made his mother cry. Not because they were sad, but because they were perfect technical diagrams for weapons that could destroy things the size of moons. "Mommy," Timmy said, not looking up from his drawing, "the bad things are coming back, but we're ready for them this time." His mother, Janet Foster, was a nurse with no military training, but she found herself understanding every detail of Timmy's drawings. More than that, she found herself knowing how to build them. Across the world, similar scenes were playing out. Farmers were modifying tractors into mobile weapons platforms. Teachers were organizing their students into tactical units. Even elderly people in nursing homes were sharing knowledge about combat, techniques that had been forgotten for 50,000 years. Captain Jake Harrison watched reports from across human space as his ship traveled toward the first rally point. Every human settlement was transforming into a military installation. But it wasn't chaos. It was coordination on a scale that defied explanation. "Captain," said Ellen, who had been monitoring council communications, "the alien governments are terrified. They're calling it an invasion. They think humanity is preparing to conquer the galaxy." Jake understood their fear. From the outside, it must look like the entire human race had suddenly become a military force. Ships were being modified into weapons. Civilian stations were turning into fortresses, and every human seemed to know exactly what they were supposed to do. "Are we?" asked Ryan. "Preparing to conquer the galaxy?" Jake considered the question. The knowledge flowing through his mind included tactical information about every alien species, every government, every military force in known space. He could see exactly how to defeat them all if necessary, but that wasn't what the knowledge was for. "No," he said finally, "we're preparing to save it." The rally point was a system called HD Wixteen 4595, about 30 light-years from Earth. When the New Horizon arrived, Jake was amazed by what he found. Hundreds of human ships had gathered, from tiny mining vessels to massive colony ships. But they weren't the same ships that had left Earth and the colonies. Every vessel had been modified. Weapons that shouldn't have been possible with human technology. Armor that could deflect energy attacks. Engines that could move faster than anything the Council had ever built. It was as if the entire human fleet had been upgraded by an advanced civilization. "Admiral Clark is requesting your immediate presence on the flagship," reported Carol from the communication station. The flagship was the former colony ship New Tokyo, now transformed into something that looked more like a weapon than a transport. Admiral Susan Clark met Jake in what used to be the ship's main conference room, but now resembled a military command center. "Jake," Susan said, "I need to ask you something, and I need a completely honest answer. When you look at the tactical displays, when you see the approaching Void Devourers, what does your instinct tell you to do?" Jake studied the holographic display showing the galaxy. The dark entities were closer now, less than 4 days away from the outer systems. As he looked at them, he felt something cold and determined rising in his chest. "Hunt them," he said quietly. "Hunt them down and kill every single one." Susan nodded. "That's what I thought. Jake, we're not the same species we were a week ago. We're remembering what we were bred to be 50,000 years ago. We're becoming weapons again. Is that a bad thing?" Susan gestured toward the display, where another star system had just gone dark. "Considering what we're facing? No, it's exactly what the galaxy needs." As Jake watched, more human ships arrived at the rally point. Each one was different from the last, modified in ways that seemed to defy the laws of physics. But somehow he understood exactly how each modification worked and what it was designed to kill. The ancient war was about to begin again, and humanity was ready. The first Void Devourer entered the galaxy at 0347 hours Galactic Standard Time. Within minutes, the Kepler system simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not consumed, erased, as if it had never been there at all. Admiral Susan Clark stood in the command center of the transformed New Tokyo, watching the tactical displays with thousands of other awakened humans. The ship that had once carried families to new colonies was now the nerve center of humanity's war machine. All human vessels. "This is Admiral Clark." She spoke into the communication system that now connected every human in the galaxy. "The enemy has arrived. You know what to do." Captain Jake Harrison was in position with the outer defense fleet, his ship now bristling with weapons that bent reality around them. As he watched the first Void Devourer approach, he felt no fear. Only a cold certainty that had been sleeping in his genes for 50,000 years. The creature was massive, easily the size of Earth's moon, but its shape hurt to look at directly. It existed in too many dimensions at once, constantly shifting between forms that the human eye couldn't properly process. Where it moved, space itself seemed to tear, leaving scars of absolute darkness behind. "All ships," Jake commanded. "Remember your training." But it wasn't training in any normal sense. It was genetic memory, passed down through generations of humans who had never known why they carried the knowledge of an ancient war. Now, as the Void Devourers returned, that knowledge awakened. Every human ship opened fire at the same moment. But these weren't normal weapons. The beams that lanced out from human vessels were made of crystallized mathematics, equations given physical form that could affect things existing outside normal space-time. The first Void Devourer reeled as the attack struck it. For the first time in 50,000 years, it felt pain. More importantly, it felt fear. On a mining station near Saturn, Bobby Martinez activated the weapon he had built from spare parts. The device sent out a pulse that traveled faster than light, carrying a frequency that made reality itself hostile to entities from outside normal dimensions. On the research station orbiting Kepler 442b, Dr. Grace Thompson activated gravitational fields that folded space in ways that trapped beings who existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. On Earth, 8-year-old Timmy Foster pressed a button on a device his mother had built from his drawings. The signal it sent out was picked up by similar devices across the planet, creating a resonance pattern that reached across the galaxy, and on 10,000 other worlds, in space stations and ships and settlements. Awakened humans added their voices to what was becoming something much larger than a battle. It was becoming a song. The song had no words in any language that normal humans would recognize, but every awakened human knew it, had always known it, buried deep in their genetic code. It was the song that had ended the First War, the song that had driven the Void Devourers into the dark spaces between galaxies. Admiral Clark felt the song building in her mind, connecting her to every other human in the galaxy. Through that connection, she could see the entire battlefield. She could coordinate millions of people across thousands of light years as if they were all parts of a single organism. Phase 2, she announced, and every human in the galaxy knew exactly what that meant. The human ships began moving in patterns that defied military logic, but made perfect sense on a level deeper than rational thought. They weren't fighting like separate vessels with individual commanders. They were moving like cells in a vast body, each one perfectly coordinated with all the others. More Void Devourers entered the galaxy, dozens of them, each one the size of a small moon, and hungry for the destruction they remembered from the ancient war. But something was different this time. The prey they had come to consume was fighting back in ways they had forgotten were possible. Jake watched his tactical display as human forces engaged the invaders across a front that spanned half the galaxy. Every human settlement had become a weapon. Every human ship was part of a coordinated attack. And at the center of it all was Earth, broadcasting a signal that made the very fabric of space-time hostile to beings that didn't belong there. The Void Devourers had spent 50,000 years preparing for this moment, learning from their previous defeat, developing new strategies to combat the weapons that had driven them away. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that humanity would be the same as it was before. They were wrong. This wasn't the same species that had fought the First War. Those humans had been warriors, bred and trained and armed for a specific purpose. These humans were something more. They were evolution itself, 50,000 years of genetic memory and adaptation and improvement, all awakening at once. Captain Jake felt the song reaching its crescendo. Every human voice in the galaxy was joining in, from the smallest child to the oldest adult. The words they spoke weren't in any earthly language. They were older than that, older than human civilization, older than the species itself. The words rewrote the laws of physics. Where the song reached, reality became hostile to entities from outside normal space-time. The Void Devourers, creatures that had consumed entire galaxies, found themselves unable to exist in the same universe as the awakened humans. One by one, they began to retreat. But this time, humanity didn't let them go. Phase 3, Admiral Clark announced, and every human ship in the galaxy turned toward the dark spaces between the stars. The hunt began. It lasted 3 days. Human ships pursued the fleeing void devourers across impossible distances, following them into the dark regions where no normal matter could exist. But humans weren't normal anymore. They were living weapons evolved specifically to fight this enemy. When it was over, when the last void devourer had been erased from existence, the galaxy fell silent. Captain Jake stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, looking out at space that seemed somehow brighter than it had before. The ancient threat was gone. Not driven away this time, but eliminated completely. His communication system activated. It was a message from the Galactic Council, specifically from Speaker Vorthak, whose crystal form had healed since the terror of first contact. Captain Harrison. Vorthak's voice was respectful, almost reverent. The Council requests an audience with humanity's representatives. Jake smiled. Of course, Speaker. We'll be happy to meet with you. If I may ask, Vorthak continued carefully, what is humanity's position regarding membership in the Galactic Council? Jake looked around his bridge at his crew, who were no longer just explorers and diplomats. They were guardians, protectors, the species that stood between civilization and the dark things that wanted to destroy it. We're not here to join your civilization, Speaker Vorthak, Jake said finally. We're here to protect it. The response came quickly. We understand, and we are grateful. As the New Horizon set course for Zentara Prime Station, Jake reflected on how much had changed in just 1 week. Humanity had come to the stars seeking acceptance and friendship. Instead, they had discovered their true purpose. They were the guardians of the galaxy. They always had been, and they always would be, and everyone, human and alien alike, was grateful for that.